Few events in modern history are as shocking and haunting as the Japanese surprise attack on the United States fleet in Pearl Harbor on a tranquil Sunday morning, December 7th, 1941. The devastating war that followed deeply underscores the need to understand why the attack occurred and why it was not prevented. When Leo Tolstoy wrote War and Peace, he contemplated another great calamity, Napoleon's disastrous Russian campaign. And he concluded that in order to understand such events, we must renounce a freedom that does not exist and recognize a dependence of which we are not personally conscious. This points to an obvious and yet nearly impossible task: to dig deeply into the cultural and political habits that predestine nations for war. The roots of the Pearl Harbor tragedy hold nearly 100 years of history, beginning with a brash young democracy provoking a war to satisfy its idea of manifest destiny. In 1845, the new President of the United States, James Knox Polk, used elaborate diplomatic pressure to secure the annexation of Texas. He had found success in securing Oregon from Britain and saw Texas as a similar challenge, despite vehement opposition in the Congress. It was the first step toward the annexation of the territorial prize, California. But he had misjudged the nature of the Mexican people, who viewed the loss of land as theft. Their soldiers crossed the Rio Grande and attacked American settlements, leaving Polk no choice but to declare war. By 1848, the United States acquired or conquered territories that would expand the nation to the Pacific Ocean, where she looked eagerly to the great markets of Asia. The Mexican War was not only the crucible of American destiny, it brought glory to an unsung young admiral named Matthew Galbraith Perry. Perry led the squadron of ships that laid siege to the port of Veracruz. Greater glory awaited Perry if he could gather support for a voyage to establish trade relations with a fascinating island nation that had sealed itself off from the world for 200 years. In 1851, Herman Melville wrote, "If that double-bolted land, Japan, is ever to become hospitable, it is the whale ship alone to whom the credit will be due, for already she is on the threshold." And he was right. Since the 1820s, the American whaling industry had been looking to the Pacific as whales in the Atlantic grew scarce. America still depended on whale oil for many essential purposes, from lighting lamps to lubricating machinery. However, voyages to the Pacific were long and hazardous, and shipwrecks were frequent. The island of Japan was often salvation for shipwrecked sailors, until they were found and imprisoned. United States delegations were sent in 1837 and 1846 to negotiate for their release and to attempt to establish diplomatic and trade relations. The ruling Tokugawa shogun and his government, or Bakufu, were not interested. They traded with the Dutch and Chinese on a limited and controlled basis, and that was enough. They were very aware of the effects of foreign trade, as they watched with horror as China was thrown into chaos by the opium trade. Fear of foreign intervention and influence had reached its apogee 200 years before. Jesuit missionaries had only been allowed in Japan for 40 years, but their influence provoked widespread smashing of Buddhist icons and burning of temples, and conversions to Christianity were epidemic. The Bakufu decided that Japanese culture and their control of it could not survive outside influences. All foreigners were expelled, and none would be allowed to set foot on Japanese soil except as prisoners, and they would be made to step on a crucifix that was embedded in a floor. Any Japanese who left would not be allowed to return except to be executed.